All right, we're going to jump right in and demystify the, let's be honest, kind of complicated world of debt. We're going to break down everything from interest rates all the way to this thing you hear about all the time on the news, the yield curve.
So, let's start with what sounds like a trick question, right? What's the real price of a dollar? You think, well, it's a dollar. But the real answer to this question is actually the key to understanding how everything from your savings account to the entire global economy actually works.
Because here's the thing, it all depends on when you get it. A dollar that's in your hand right now is worth more than the promise of a dollar you'll get a year from now. And that simple idea, the value of time, is the bedrock for everything else we're about to talk about.
Okay, so let's dig into that first building block, interest. And you've got to stop thinking of it as just some fee a bank charges you. It is, quite literally, the price of time.
Think of it this way. Interest is the price somebody pays for the privilege of using today dollars instead of having to wait for their tomorrow dollars. And if you're the one lending the money, it's your reward, your compensation for giving up the chance to spend your own money right now.
Let's make this super simple. Let's say I have $100 I could go spend right now. You come along and ask to borrow it. You promise to pay me back, but not just $100. You'll pay me back $102 next year. See what happened? That extra $2, that's the interest. It's the price you paid to get my money now, and it's my reward for having to wait to spend it.
Okay, so that one-on-one loan works just fine. But what if a giant company or even a government needs to borrow not $100, but billions? Well, that's where bonds come in. They take that simple promise and turn it into a massive global market.
The huge problem with a simple personal loan, an IOU, is what finance folks call liquidity risk. Basically, it's not liquid. You can't easily sell it to someone else. If you suddenly need your cash back, you're kind of stuck waiting for your friend to pay you. So the solution was a really clever invention called a bond. A bond takes that unique, one-of-a-kind IOU and turns it into a standardized, identical, tradable thing, something you can buy and sell just as easily as a share of stock.
So instead of one person trying to find someone to lend them, say, $10 million, that giant loan gets chopped up into thousands of identical little $1,000 pieces. Each one of those pieces is a bond. And because they're all the same, you can suddenly have a huge active market where people can buy and sell them in an instant.
All right, so now we have these promises, these bonds that can be traded all over the place. But once a bond is out there in the world, how does its value change? This is where it gets really, really interesting.
To understand any of this, you have to start with what's called the risk-free rate. And that's basically the interest rate on the safest loan in the entire world, a loan to the US government. Every other kind of debt, from mortgages to corporate loans, is priced by starting with this super safe rate and then adding a little extra interest to cover any additional risk.
Now, this brings us to the single most important rule you need to know about the bond market. It's a little counterintuitive at first, but it's crucial. When interest rates in the market go up, the price of existing bonds goes down. They move in opposite directions.
The best way to think about this is like a seesaw. Imagine you own a bond that pays you 3% interest. Now all of a sudden, new bonds are being sold that pay 5% interest. Well, who's going to want to buy your old, lower-paying bond at full price? Nobody. The price of your bond has to fall to make it attractive. And of course, the opposite is true. If new bonds are only paying 1%, your 3% bond looks fantastic, and its price will actually rise.
So, since U.S. government debt is the foundation of this entire system, it's really important to understand how the government actually goes about borrowing all this money. The government doesn't just borrow money in one big chunk. It borrows for different lengths of time, or what are called maturities. You've got super short-term loans called T-bills, which can last just a few months. Then there are T-notes for the medium term and T-bonds for the really long-haul loans, usually 30 years.
And when you look at how it all breaks down, it's actually pretty striking. The vast majority of government debt is not long-term. More than 3/4 of it has to be repaid and reborrowed in under 10 years. And that reliance on short-term borrowing has some pretty major consequences.
So this brings up a really critical question, right? If you're borrowing so much money for such short periods of time, what's the actual risk? Well, the danger is called refinancing risk. It's like if your mortgage wasn't for 30 years, but you had to get a brand new one every single year at whatever the current rate was. That's kind of what the government is doing with trillions of dollars. So if interest rates spike, the cost to the taxpayer, the interest payments and all that debt can just explode almost overnight.
And that brings us to the final piece of our puzzle. This is where all these ideas,
the price of time, risk, and government debt all come together to create one of the most powerful economic forecasting tools that we have.
So, what do you think would happen if we took the interest rate on a 3-month T-bill, a 2-year T-note, a 10-year T-note, and a 30-year T-bond, and we just plotted them all on a single graph?
What you get is the Treasury yield curve, and its shape is like a real-time poll of what millions of smart investors think is going to happen next. Normally, the curve slopes up, which means a healthy economy. But sometimes it inverts. It actually slopes down. That means people are demanding higher interest for a short-term loan than a long-term one, which is just weird. It's basically the market shouting a warning that it sees a slowdown coming. And historically, it's one of the most reliable recession indicators we've ever found.
And if you're wondering, why does this matter to me? Well, here you go. The interest rate on that 10-year Treasury note is pretty much the benchmark that sets the interest rate for most mortgages. So what happens in this market directly impacts what you'll pay to buy a home.
So, by understanding all these little building blocks, you can now look at this forecast for yourself. It's the collective wisdom of the entire global market telling us where the economy might be headed. The only question left is, what is today's forecast telling us right now?